afternoon, or well, good evening, and welcome back to the first episode of the Sour Lemon Podcast with, well, TastyLemons and I. This is the first episode of the Battlefield Podcast where we are talking about everything which is Battlefield, from Battlefield 1942 till Battlefield 5 and, well, soon Battlefield 6, because that is coming up. But let me first introduce my co-host, Mr. TastyLemons. How are you doing, good sir? Hello.
Good evening. How you doing?
Hello. Good to hear you. Man,
Good to be here.
this should be very interesting. This is our first episode, and it will be a relatively chaotic episode because we are basically jumping through all the Battlefield games. With
All the rambling.
All the rambling. I mean, rambling? What are you talking about? We have only good things to really say about Battlefield. Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
True statements.
It's like every Battlefield game is basically a better Battlefield than the one before. Like, they're only going up. No. Okay.
Sorry, I was just pained by the very thought of that.
I mean, we had some good Battlefield games. Let's face it.
Highs and lows.
Highs and
really
lows.
low.
And then, yeah, like, I think we are collecting the lows a little bit as of late, but that is a topic we will have over the show. For everyone who is watching this also on YouTube, keep in mind we are live streaming this right now, so if we are sometimes talking to chat, that's the reason why. Or if you're listening to it, then yeah, don't you wonder about that. And hello everyone in the chat. It's nice to have you. But Lemons, did you know that today is a special day?
Oh, it is. What's that?
Did you not know like which special day is today?
Of course.
No,
I have no idea.
it is actually the release date of Bad Company 2.
Oh, sweet Jesus. I should have that marked in my calendar.
Right? I mean, it's now, can you believe it? It's now freaking 11 years.
Oh. That hurts. That's crazy.
Man, I'm getting old. I mean, we have both started with 1942, right? Have you?
Not necessarily. I've played
No?
it, but I really, I would say I played the other games. I never got into Battlefield until the Bad Company series, but I did play 42 and 2, roughly when they launched.
Okay, so I started with 42, which was also like the years where the LAN cafes were still like a thing.
Oh,
Right.
wow,
People are like a lot of unwashed boys are meeting all in a room and then playing Battlefield together.
yeah. Now it's singular. It's just unwashed boys in their own room.
Yes, basically. I really love Battlefield because, like, the scale of it, and it's kind of weird. So there was like 32 maps and 64 people maps, right? And depending on
yeah.
which maps you played, you got different equipment. So the maps were much bigger depending on how many people played on it. And in the big maps, you had like U-boats, which you didn't have in the smaller maps. So if you didn't play the big maps, you actually missed out on gameplay content, which was
Right.
like rather interesting. And your aircraft carrier and whatnot. Then we had, let us go through the time. We had Vietnam. I know a lot of people are forgetting about Vietnam.
Well, are you talking about the release title Vietnam or the DLC?
No, the release title.
Yeah, I forget where that was. That right before number two, or was that after?
Yes. No. It was the second game after 1942.
Okay,
It's
that one always slips my mind.
it slipped a lot of people's mind, and well, was what it was. I think it was the first Battlefield. Well, it was very quickly EA realizing the potential of Battlefield, and then was just like, we should make it a Call of Duty thing, like a yearly occasional thing. I think it wasn't even developed by DICE, but like an offspring of DICE already. And where did I find Lemons? Look, he was standing on the street. He was rumbling
Oh my
about
God,
Battlefield and EA.
I forgot. It technically was developed by DICE. It was DICE Canada. I
Oh,
forgot entirely about that.
yeah.
Wow.
Like DICE has now, like when somebody is telling me like DICE is developing this game, I'm like, yeah, which DICE? Like,
Clarify, please.
yeah, we have a few DICEs now, even though they never mention that.
Yeah, I always forget about the Canadian one.
Yeah, does that still exist actually?
I don't think it does.
I,
If it is, it's really low key. Really, the only two that I'm really aware of nowadays, the HQ, what is it, Sweden, right? And then
yeah,
LA, of course.
I think they have another studio somewhere. I think the main thing is in Malmö, in Sweden.
Bless you.
Look, I'm bad with names. Afterwards, we had Battlefield 2, and
Oh yeah.
that was the first modern game. There was one thing which completely annoyed me. I remember this still vividly. I was on an airfield, and I saw a jet coming into my direction, going into attack mode, flying directly, like pointing at me, unloading his payload, and I was just going behind cover behind a small wooden box, and the whole explosive wave was just like completely deflected by the small wooden box, and I survived because that
Yeah, the
small
power of the wooden box.
It's like, man, there was like the moment where I was really thinking like, man, if this game had destruction, that would be so cool. Well, and we would get that soon.
Apparently, they listen to you.
Well, first, EA did a very EA thing and basically showed the middle finger to PC gamers, and then Battlefield didn't came out on PC anymore, and it became a
Right, which was
console only game.
super weird choice.
There was another game before Bad Company, which was a console exclusive. Which was that? Can you?
It wa- oh that, it really wasn't. It just technically Battlefield 2, but they slapped like another tag on it.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of it though. It's something generic. It's something combat, I think.
I, I completely. Like, I also know that there was like a free to play game which used like the Battlefield 2 engine like 7 years later when Bad Company was already a thing. And it was just like, oh my god, EA, stop it.
Those I remember. There was at least two play for free games, I think, because it wasn't the animated one free as well, and they were both made by the same dev.
Oh my god, yeah, there was Battlefield. Oh, like there was
There's
Battlefield.
Battlefield Heroes. I'll never forget that because of the damn jingle. But the other free to play game I think was literally just called like Play for Free.
Battlefield free to play. They actually called it that. Yeah.
That's funny.
It was such a stupid name. But Battlefield Heroes, I would have been so interested to see if they would have released Battlefield Heroes like in the last 2 years.
Yeah, honestly, it was made way before its time. If they remade that now, I think it would have a huge following.
Yeah, like it was very close to what, well, not necessarily Fortnite was, but the idea was definitely there for what Fortnite would become at some point.
Oh, absolutely.
Was it Modern Combat, like the first Battlefield game? Yeah, I think it was Modern Combat, the first
Yeah,
Battlefield game.
Battlefield 2 Modern Combat, I think, was the first console.
And well, nobody really cared for that.
Right.
And then they came with a complete surprise game around the corner nobody had on their radar, and that was Battlefield Bad Company. And that was also a console exclusive. Like, we PC players could just look at it in awe and be like, why are we not getting this? What is going on here? And
I forgot they did that.
EA's answer was literally like, well, then make your platform less suck and make more people play on that platform so that we can make more money. Like, that was basically literally EA's statement why they are not bringing that game to PC. Because that was the time where the PC was dying. Again.
A few times. That's interesting. Wasn't that also the first game to feature the Frostbite engine?
Yes, and it was the first game with destruction.
Yeah, because they came in tow. So I'm curious if they just like the build better on consoles or something. I have no idea why.
It was literally because the PC was, again, like, not the big gaming platform. Well, a lot of publisher believed it wasn't like the gaming platform at the time.
Yeah.
Stupid again, but yeah, it never came out on the PC. And then,
Oh, I think we did do an injustice though, because I do believe the 2142 came out before Bad Company.
oh, how could I forget? Oh my god,
Can't forget about that golden game.
it was actually not bad.
It wasn't bad. It's kind of overhyped now through everyone's um, I don't know what you would call it, lens of nostalgia.
I
But
mean,
it had some really good ideas that are really
yeah,
fun.
had some really cool play modes, and it was the only sci-fi Battlefield they did.
Correct. So far.
I've, I have to admit, I have not really played the 2142, like the sci-fi one. I've not, I've not played that really.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that came out of that was the carrier mode, which I forget what they called in that. It might have been actually carrier mode, but they
Carrier
brought that
mode,
back for
yeah, yeah.
Battlefield. Later in Battlefield for 5, I think, right? It
For four,
was 4, yeah. Oh God, yeah. Carrier Assault when they brought in that whole DLC. But
yeah,
that was an extremely fun mode, and it was even more so on the 2142.
it was
Um,
really cool. I think the biggest problem, the the sci-fi one. I just call it the sci-fi one because I don't want to say the date every time. It's too long. Um, but if that game would have had the Frostbite engine and would have had the destruction already we had in Bad Company,
yeah,
ooh, that could have been great.
yeah, because I think it was on basically the same engine as Battlefront or Battlefield 2 was, which
Yes.
so basically it was like a reskin. So it's exactly the same thing with futuristic settings.
Yep. That was like we really like the PC gamers really got the shaft for a while. It's oof. And then Bad Company 2 got announced and finally it came back to the PC. And man, that game is still holding in high regards. I think
Timeless wonder.
I think this was one of those games like I have never heard anyone saying it was bad. Like, it's like when you were asking a Battlefield player, this is the Battlefield game which unifies all the Battlefield gamers.
Correct.
Like, I have never heard anyone saying like, yeah, Bad Company 2 was actually a pretty bad game, or well, I didn't like it. Like, I never heard that.
Yeah, there's usually a large debate around Battlefield 2. A lot of the older players will stand by that being the general peak, and then anyone newer to the series just like, well, that's an old terrible game. But I think yeah, Bad Company 2, you really rarely hear anyone really debate how good it is.
I would definitely debate that Battlefield 2 wasn't great. Like, it was.
Yeah, I think that one also kind of the further it gets away from its release date, the more and more nostalgia it garners.
The thing with Battle, like, this is definitely a thing we both agree is Battlefield had a lot of those moments where they came up with amazing ideas, and then the next game came out, and those ideas disappeared. It's like,
Yeah.
why did
They
you,
have a
what?
Dice is curious in the way that they do development, and I kind of enjoy it. They try new things every time, for better or for worse,
Yep.
compared to um, other studios who, if they get that winning formula, they're just gonna take that and rehash it every other year. But it can go either way, really. It can be bad or good.
It's just weird. And then Bad Company 2 was such a huge success. Then they put out the Vietnam DLC. Have you ever played that?
Oh yeah, that was. Then that will go down as probably my favorite DLC of any video game ever.
Wait, is it sarcasm?
Not at all for me. I enjoyed it greatly. That one I do think garners debate, which is kind of funny.
I think it was a weird thing. It was just like Bad Company 2, who is definitely in our times, right? And then there's this one-time DLC where people just wanted to get more content for Bad Company 2, and they're like, yeah, here's more content, Vietnam. I was like, huh? What? Okay. What? Why would you do that?
Why not?
I mean, it was funny. Like again, I think the biggest thing, which really was just great in Bad Company 2, was the total destruction of every or nearly every building.
Correct.
Like that
And that
was, yeah,
that does go both ways. It's good and it was really fun to play, but it also was a huge issue for map balancing because every now and then you would hit a stalemate where you just absolutely
oh yeah,
decimated the whole level. So you pretty much have nothing to hide behind. So if you're playing Rush, which was the hit back then, it was a mess to try to actually get anywhere forward.
yeah. This is why I mostly played Conquest. Like it's the first game mode they brought to Battlefield, and I mostly stayed with that. And Zoe, thank you very
Oh yeah.
much for the bits, the elixir. I mean, thank you. Um, yeah, I'm always like the Conquest guy.
Did they bring Rush with the first Bad Company game?
I have not played the first Bad Company game.
Oh, you console only.
Again,
I think they did. I don't recall ever playing that in the other ones. Um, and then they were pretty well focused in the Bad Company series, and then obviously three, and then that kind of flipped around.
yeah. So after Bad Company 2, we had, as you mentioned, 3. And I have to say, I was vastly disappointed by 3 to Bad Company
That's
2.
surprising. Well, that's a fair point.
It's a step back. It was a complete step back for me. It's
It
like,
was.
why are you removing like destroyable buildings? Yeah, now we have like this one building which explodes in great fashion, and it's like, dude, I don't give a damn about that. I don't want to go back to the Battlefield 2 times. Like, don't do that to me. Unfortunately for me, and you've definitely played those games more than I did, but
Hmm.
unfortunately for me, I had a huge issue with 3 and 4. I got a new GPU, and for whatever reason, that GPU would crash my PC after like 10 minutes when I played Battlefield. And everyone who had that specific GPU at the time had that issue. So of course people were like, Dice, it's your game only, so fix it. And Dice was like, no, no, that's not our problem. That's Nvidia's problem. And Nvidia was like, yeah, that's not our problem. That's the GPU manufacturer. Who, like, because it was, I don't know who was it, like EVGA or something like that. And they were like, no, no, that's a Dice problem. Like, we are just adding defense. So everyone was just like pushing the blame to the other faction, and nobody did anything. So I couldn't play really like a lot of Battlefield 3 and 4.
That's interesting. Yeah, I had no experience. I think Bad Company 1 and Battlefield 3 I exclusively played on Xbox, and I don't remember having any issues with Battlefield 4.
Yeah, it was again like just that specific GPU. It was so shitty. So then Battlefield 4 came out. Okay, let me ask you this magical question. If you have to make a decision between 3 and 4, which one is it?
Oh man. I think it's got to be 3.
Oh, okay.
Which is gonna, yeah, that's probably an unpopular opinion, but I love Conquest, but for some reason it's like Bad Company 2 and then Battlefield 3 I think did Rush so well, but specifically 3 because the way that they built basically any map in 3 was almost made it into they made a Rush map basically, and then they made whatever was left of that into a Conquest map, whereas almost all the other Battlefields they've done the opposite. They'll make a Conquest kind of map, and they'll shoehorn a Rush map or the other variants out of that. So some of the levels we got, um, it was a lot of those Battlefield moments transitioning from one point to the next.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting to play. Plus, Battlefield 3, I think the gunplay was really good.
Okay.
Yeah, no, Battlefield 4, especially, it had some really good DLCs. And just the general gameplay is rather enjoyable. I think it's just that fact of you get so many more of those. That's the whole thing of the whole Battlefield series is you get these crazy moments that occur in the middle of a game that just make it absolutely amusing, whether it's funny or impressive at the time.
Yeah.
It just makes it a lot more fun to play the game. And I think you got a lot more of those moments in Battlefield 3. 4, you get some of those moments because what did they call it? The whole evolution bit? They kind of force that in there. I like those moments, but I feel like you get those kind of moments in Battlefield 3 just naturally through playing the game. You don't need like a randomly activated event to occur in the middle of the map to be like, ooh,
Yeah,
cool, you know?
there was I think one of the bigger problems I had. Battlefield is a sandbox, or in my eyes at least, was always this sandbox where players created their own moments, those Battlefield moments, as even EA would call them. And because of the revolution, these Battlefield moments were forced, right?
Okay.
Like as you said, it was not like the Battlefield players basically like made those moments anymore. It was the game itself who was pushing that now. So yeah,
Yeah, they were cool the first time you do it, and then after that, it's kind of a big annoyance.
Yeah.
Especially the frame loss for the Siege of Shanghai was impressive.
I remember that. Yeah,
It was brutal.
that was something. I wonder if like I would actually love to see the Levolution plus the Bad Company Destruction, but then the Levolution is changing permanently. Like it's not just a one-time effect, but that actually slowly those things are doing something to the environment. Like when you have those, what was the one where you created like, where you destroyed like a dam or something like that, and then you would just have water floating everywhere. Like that water.
I think technically that's two different ones. So you have Lenkang Dam, which you broke, and that kind of made a river, but didn't really do it. But the other one was Flood Zone, and I think it was something else. You kind of lift a gate or something, and it floods the whole level.
Yeah, that like actually the water is like slowly degrading like the soil maybe, and then tanks have like a harder time to move. Like really take the whole environment stuff to the next level. That's something I would love to see in the future.
That would be interesting, yeah, and that would follow suit when we get to some of the new stuff they added in the later games.
Yeah.
Also for 4, I think it's fair to. I think we're obligated to heckle the launch of that game because I don't think any title. Well, I wouldn't say any. I would say many titles fit into that category of such a horrific launch for a AAA title.
That was
It's
bad.
horrible.
And then, like, even with all the bugs aside, then people slowly realized when everyone was like, yeah, if they're fixing the bugs, this game would be amazing. And then they fixed the bugs, and people realized, oh shit, it's not the bugs, it's the netcode.
Oh yeah.
And DICE, like, this is something I will always remember and I will always hold a little bit against DICE, is DICE basically packed up and left. Like, they left. They were like, yeah, sorry folks, we are focusing on the next game. Here's LA DICE, who's now saving the game. Have a nice one. Bye. It's like, huh?
Basically.
And poor LA DICE had to do it, and they did a fantastic job. So
yeah, they don't get enough credit. They get heckled a lot, but they always get thrown into some horrific situation that they somehow manage to salvage.
Yeah. I mean, they're apparently working also on the new Battlefield 6 in conjunction with DICE, the main studio.
That's interesting because they announced that both main DICE studios are working on it as well as Criterion.
Yeah.
And the way that they announced it made it sound like they weren't even working on Battle Royale, which would be even more interesting. If they have 3 studios working on the base game, that would be rather impressive.
I mean, we will see how that goes, but we will talk about that when we are getting a little bit into the Battlefield 6 rumors. Yeah. There are a lot of them. I mean,
a whole lot.
After Battlefield 4, something interesting happened, and we are coming to, I think, a game we will maybe even both disagree on, but then Battlefield 1 happened, and some people call it a great Battlefield game, and some people call it a mediocre to meh Battlefield game. Which side are you on? If you are not,
it depends on.
In the
is it my own personal opinion?
Yes, yeah, of course, always.
I think. You can take it 2 different ways. Commercially, it was a hit. Absolutely, Battlefield's never seen success like Battlefield 1.
Yeah, they had like,
and I think they did pretty well in that.
20 to 30 million players, which is crazy.
Oh yeah, on launch, it was crazy. But personally, I think it. And I think it ended up going the opposite way in some of the later titles. But for Battlefield 1, they really tried to make it as streamlined and easy to pick up for a newer player as they possibly could. I think the base gunplay of the game is slowed down quite a bit, the time to kill, time to death, to a point where it's a lot easier. Whereas Battlefield traditionally it's not been a mill sim by any standards, but it's been a lot more difficult, a lot more strategic. Than a lot of other arcade shooters. You're not just running out and gunning people. But Battlefield 1 literally felt like that. I mean,
the term you could use was they Call of Duty the shit out of that game.
Yeah, and it worked to a degree. A lot of people liked the game, but I think for a lot of hardcore Battlefield players, something about it wasn't fun. I will say the maps were really good. I did enjoy the maps and the way they laid out a lot of that stuff, but the base game, the gunplay, which obviously in a FPS game is a rather large component, just didn't feel that entertaining to me.
Yeah, I'm on the side of I love Battlefield 1. I have 700 hours in Battlefield 1. I played that game quite a bit, and I was like kind of frightened when I saw my hours. I know that some people will laugh about those hours. Keep in mind that I'm not a shooter player. Like, the only shooter, and especially multiplayer shooter I play, is Battlefield. So 700 hours in a Battlefield game is actually quite a thing for me. But I love Battlefield 1. I think I loved it because I actually didn't necessarily saw it as a Battlefield game, which is a problem. Like, it's weird in that regard. So I love Battlefield 1.
It was fun. I definitely have a lot of hours in it. I think it was. I played a whole lot of it when it was out. But as soon as the next game came out, I haven't gone back. I literally think I've played Battlefield 1 maybe twice since the next one came out. I don't know why. It's something about it. Even like the planes are unforgivably easy, which is really ironic given that it's in World War One, and
Yeah.
the planes were paper mache and wood.
Yeah, they were not really great to handle. That's true.
It was rather funny. But no, I definitely had a good amount of. It's hard. Again, it's kind of like when you see a Steam review with someone who has like 5,000 hours, and then they give it like 1 out of 10 and say it's terrible. It's like, well, what? Why'd you put so
Yeah,
many hours into it? It's the
that
same
is
thing at
true.
Battlefield One between PC and Xbox. I don't know how many hours I have in it, but it's a lot. So it's hard to say that I hated the game, but I definitely didn't. It's not high up on my list of Battlefield titles for sure.
I think one thing we can definitely agree on is Battlefield 1 had, I think, well, not anymore, but at that point in time, I was actually thinking that Battlefield 1 had the most horrific DLC policy with how they did DLCs. Like,
Yeah.
the first DLC was like the France DLC. That was good. All right. Then Russia came and had some horrific levels. Like, some of the levels I was really just like, oh.
Yeah, the one with the big cathedral in the middle was it's a giant meme. I use that as reference a lot when I'm playing Battlefield now because it's just so horrifically made.
I know we haven't touched upon this, but till that point, the worst Battlefield map for me was Metro. I think did they introduce Metro with 3 or 4? Was it 4?
It
3.
was three, and
It was
it
3.
was a somehow a worse version in three. They fixed it up a little bit in four.
I was just a
That's a
meat
hot
grinder.
point. Yeah, that's a big debate in the Battlefield community as well, um, because it kind of goes against the very foundations of a Battlefield game to
Yeah,
make such a um, like a basic 3 lane map with no vehicles whatsoever.
I think
It's
it
this
wasn't even
very
3 lanes in Battlefield 3.
no in three. Yeah, it came down to that one big lane right in the middle of it, and that's where they kind of fixed it a bit. In four, they added a few more areas, but it was still horrible, especially if you played hardcore. Oh my god,
Oh, let's. It was.
It's just explosives everywhere.
Yeah. And till that point, Metro was really like the worst map in my opinion. And then the cathedral came around, the St. Petersburg or whatever that was. And it was
So
just like,
bad.
oh my god, who played this and thought this would be a good map? Like, seriously. Ugh. And then, even though at that point, so going back to the DLC policy, like it was still a
Mhm.
good DLC package. Like there were a good amount of maps, there were a good amount of like new weapons to it, and I was like, yeah, all right, all right. And then it just became shit. Then there was the like they started to split them up into like multiple parts, right? They didn't just release the DLC. Now it was like multiple things,
Right.
and it felt weird. And then the last DLC we watched, what was it? Apocalypse? Yeah, Apocalypse was the last one.
Yeah.
That was basically just like 2 new maps.
Yeah, they're really phoning it in at the end. I think they were all trying to just work on the next game.
Yeah, and especially because like one of the maps was then the airplane map where people were just flying around and everyone was like, "Huh? What is that?
Right.
Why is this existing?" And then we have Battlefield 5, and that is the actual game right now. And I have to say, again, till that point, I thought that Battlefield 1 has a pretty bad DLC policy. Well, welcome to Battlefield 5. Take it away, Lemons. What do you think about Battlefield 5 and stuff?
Yeah, exactly what we were saying earlier about DICE and their methods of not taking everything that's worked and putting that into a game. They just like to change a little bit of everything. And I think that finally caught up to them to the point where they changed way too many different things for no apparent reason.
Yeah.
And so at launch, there was such a laundry list of things that they needed to change. They were horrifically behind schedule as soon as they launched that game. And it was just not even to mention the way that they did the live service, then the changes to the TTK. Those are completely different things. And you have also some other smaller things on the PC, specifically with performance and cheaters.
Yeah.
But man, that was such a weird. It's almost the opposite of Battlefield 4. So Battlefield 5, when it launched, I loved it.
Yeah, it became a
Um,
very different game.
and it was a kind of a comical dumpster fire ever since a few weeks after launch. They just were all over the place,
I
and
still
it never
wonder what
recovered.
happened there. Like the beta was like we all played the alpha and beta, like we were at it from the beginning,
Oh yeah,
and I actually when I played the alpha and beta was calling it the best Battlefield game I've ever played
I'm
at that
gonna go
point.
find that recording.
I said that you won't find it because it was a mixer. Whoop whoop whoop. That thing is gone.
Rip.
Um, but no, they were like I was really like all in on that Battlefield game. Like it felt more tactical. TTK was much slower. Like it felt like going back to the old Battlefield game. Like buildings were all destroyable again, or well, destroyable to a certain point. They learned a
Right.
little bit from that, and it was like, oh my god, this could shape up to become the best Battlefield we have ever gotten from the developers. And then the release happened.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, wait, this is not what I played in the beta. What happened? Like, seriously,
Yeah.
guys, what happened?
It was bizarre, and it was difficult to tell where they were drawing their information from because it's like no one was really asking for the things that they were changing and doing. So everyone was just equally as confused the whole time.
I wonder how much, and this is actually something which might be interesting for Battlefield 6, but I can definitely mention it here. I wonder how much EA had a say in this and was like,
Right.
no, make it more like Battlefield 1. Make it more like Battlefield 1. This is not Battlefield 1. But we don't want to make it Battlefield 1. No, you want to. Because our money says you want to. Like, I wonder how much that was a thing. Which brings me to the actual point that just a week ago, EA basically announced that at this point, they would not interfere with game development anymore. And they would just give the companies money and shut the hell up about it so that they can finally make the games they want to make. And it's like, duh? Like, yeah?
Yeah. It seems
What?
obvious. Anthem's going to become the martyr for saving the rest of the games that are currently in development.
So sad as that might be,
It
it's
was.
really yeah.
So hopefully they don't mess around too much because yeah, some of the things they made are in Battlefield 5. The decision making seems so blatantly based off trying to make a profit, even at the expense of the core community of the game. Is so bizarre.
Reach more players, but the only thing they did was like driving players away because, like, as you said, Battlefield is not really the military sim. It's not an armor. We can all agree on that. This is not an
Hmm.
armor game or some like squads or walking with guns or whatever. But Battlefield is still a relatively complex game when it comes to numbers and how things are intertwined with each other. So I think what we really saw with Battlefield 5 was the snowball effect of just changing one small thing, which then would change another thing. And because they were all so closely intertwined, the things, like, you would say, like, okay, changing how quickly you can die in a game might not really do anything. But then you think about, like, how much effect it will have with all the weapon balance, map balance, and whatever. It's not a small thing at all.
Right.
So yeah, that was bad.
And it's funny, kind of a smaller thing that they also changed, and there's a lot of developers starting to do this, is the access of information they have in the game. A lot of studios are not really sharing that anymore. So there was a lot of um,
Yeah,
statistics websites that you could get a bunch of really in-depth stats on that are basically non-existent anymore, just because studios are not providing easy access to that information anymore.
Yeah.
So when they make all these changes, it takes us a while to figure out exactly what they did and how that's affecting the game.
Yeah. There's the patch notes were like really bad sometimes. Yeah, I agree. And then there was the live service.
Oh yeah.
Man, I think we talked about this back in the day, but if this is the future of Battlefield and how we are getting like new content for a new Battlefield game, I want my season pass back, please. Like I'm shelling out my $40 for that season pass, and I would be happy with that. But
It, yeah, it's one of those things that on paper it looks great, but it was just so horribly performed. I don't think DICE is at all used to that model in the way that however EA pushes it. Clearly, it can work. I mean, they technically do that with their sports games, but those are entirely different.
yep,
Um, so it's just interesting.
I think the problem is like they saw Fortnite, right? Like just reaping in the money with their live
Yeah.
service games and with their skins, and they were like, well, we can do that too. The problem is just, have you ever bought a skin for Battlefield 5?
Oh no,
Like,
no, I've never purchased anything cosmetic based in Battlefield.
and that's the problem. Like, I know that some people, like, are you generally somebody who doesn't give a shit about cosmetics, or how does it work?
It depends on the game. If it's an FPS, probably not. I think my big thing is if I can't see it, I really don't care. If I'm playing a third person game, I can say I have shelled out money for cosmetics for those games.
Yeah, like I'm basically on the same level. Or I'm like, if I find something which looks really cool, then I will shell out some money for that. Like I have paid for microtransactions because I also see like a way to support the developer and the ongoing development. What the idea of a live service game actually is, right? Like we are paying for the
Right.
cosmetics and they are making new content for it. But if Battlefield 5 is anything to go by, apparently not a lot of people have paid for it. like
That's a
the,
very valid point.
we didn't get a lot of like content, and again, like most of the skins were shit. They were
Yeah, that
boring.
was another thing. Yeah, and they had so much stuff to draw that off of. It was just it's crazy that they couldn't. You don't even have to think anything up. It's a historical event that already happened. Just go look at some pictures.
And even
And the
then,
fact that they couldn't is crazy.
like they, interestingly enough, I think they also failed on the cosmetics quite a bit because the first trailer and the first announcement of Battlefield 5, they were actually going very ham with the cosmetics, right? Like all the
A little
things
too
you,
ham, but yeah.
yeah, like of course with the soldiers who were wounded and you could have like prosthetics and whatnot, but nothing of that existed in the game later on. And it's like,
Correct. And there was a few of those things that never panned out. Even some of the mechanics that they showed off never existed. We never got um, picking up or moving down squad mates. Um,
yeah,
and there's another big one that I'm forgetting as well. But there was a few items that they had shown on the launch trailer that never amounted to anything.
tank, like the tank outfitting was also not like a thing. They apparently
Oh
were.
yeah, yeah. Technically, we got it, but it was like a year and a half or maybe even 2 years into the game, and then they gave us very few skins. It was
Yeah,
just a few.
they gave us very few. There was a lot of thing they basically overpromised, and I really think the problem was that a lot of people left the game behind very quickly.
Oh yeah,
Like we got
and that's
some.
again the fact that they just kept changing things over and over again. Every time you'd come back, there'd be 50 new things. It's hard to get used to a game like that.
Yeah, it really is. We would definitely go a little bit deeper in some of the games, and some, especially like live service, will be a big point down the road we have to talk a little bit about, because there's a lot of stuff and we could probably sit here for the next 2 hours just talk about like live service games for every Battlefield game and where they did it well and where they screwed it up. So that would be a separate podcast at some point. But so let me ask you something. Let me throw you a question in. What is the best Battlefield game for you, but you are not allowed to choose Bad Company? I would not make it easy.
Oh man. That's tough. That's a very tough question.
I know I
I
can
think
mean.
if you have to think of the whole game through development, probably Battlefield 4, just based off of I loved those DLCs in
Okay.
that game. Um, what was it? Second Assault and was it Dragon's Teeth, I believe. Both absolutely amazing. Both heavy on the vehicles, which are probably why they come to mind.
I think the
Um,
DLCs for 4 were amazing.
oh, they were great, and they even had some of those. They tried the night operations that didn't really pan out very well, but hey, at least they tried it. They gave it a good shake, and then they had those community maps, which is a really cool way.
Yeah,
They literally, through the whole process of development of the maps, they would throw these on the forums, and we could talk about them, tell them what we wanted in the maps, and they actually made all these live updates. It was really cool.
for sure.
Even though if I didn't love the gunplay all that much, and people love to talk about how many guns were in Battlefield 4, but it felt like 60% of them were just a reskin of another gun. So why there was like I don't know how many guns in that game. I ended up using like 4
Yeah,
pretty much at any time. But for some reason, I still want to say if they could just re-release Battlefield 5 from like the beta, I would I would love that. I think that might be my favorite to play
yeah.
moment. But taking in the whole lifespan of Battlefield 5, it was such a train wreck. There's no way I can say that.
All right. Let me interrupt
How
you
about
here for a
yourself?
second. By the way, Chad, of course I'm a monster. If I would have let him choose Bad Company 2, then this conversation would be 30 seconds
So
long,
quick.
and it would just be like, oh, Bad Company 2. Like, I don't have to ask him a question I know the answer on already.
It would just become a Bad Company 2 fanfic.
Yeah, like, of course I'm not letting him choose that. So don't hate me for that. My personal one, I think I will actually go with 1942.
Oh wow, classic.
I will actually go with 1942 because, well, first there was, of course, a little bit of this. You have never seen the scale before, right? Like, this was the very first game where scale was just a thing.
Oh yeah,
But what I really loved about it was the amount of vehicles you had. You had your aircraft carriers, and people could like move those aircraft carriers. They were not AI controlled; they were player controlled, which was really cool. And then you would start from those aircraft carriers with your airplanes. Like, you would not just spawn in; you had to start from the aircraft carriers, which was another thing. Then you had your U-boats and your water landing crafts. Like, the maps were actually huge, which of course ended up in some downplay here and there sometimes where everything slowed down and then a sniper would just kill you. Those were the times. Horrific. Um, but like, just the amount of different vehicles, I think I've never seen ever again in a Battlefield game, which were player controlled. And I really
that's
love
true,
that.
and it is unfortunate because I do feel like they were sort of pushing for that sort of direction in 5, but it clearly never got anywhere near that.
Yeah, like, especially, like, I love Battlefield 1, but the problem with Battlefield 1 is very much infantry design, which makes sense at World War One. But let's be honest here,
Correct.
well, Battlefield One wasn't really set in World War One, so there wasn't really like an excuse. Like, they did go pretty crazy on some of the stuff. But yeah, Battlefield 1942 was definitely the game for me, which I would still love to see some things coming back. Which brings me to the next question, and you can probably already imagine what I will ask you for. Name me the worst Battlefield game, with an exception. You are not allowed to name Hardline.
I was going to bring that up. I conveniently just skipped right over that.
We did.
Yeah, I assumed that was the plan.
Yeah.
The worst out of those, Hardline. Given that. I mean, it's easy to pick on Battlefield 5 on the same boat, even though I literally just said it could have been one of my favorites, but I'm not sure I'm going to use that one. Shoot.
I make Lemon's questions his life choices right now.
I think I'm going to end up being the person with 2,000 hours in a game meme, because I'm going to say probably Battlefield 1.
Oh, really?
There's much good things I can say about it. It's my least favorite. I think the thing is here, I'm such a Battlefield stan that it's my least favorite Battlefield, which means it's got like a 9 out of 10.
Yeah, that's fair. So Battlefield 1 isn't for you, which is your... Like, this is all personal. Like, we are not building any scales. We are not reviewers. Like, we are just Battlefield players, and we have our own opinions about everything in Battlefield, and especially the Battlefield community. It's like assholes, right? Everyone has one, and so everyone has an opinion.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah. Everyone's entitled to their own wrong opinions. It's fine.
Especially in Battlefield. Okay, so there's Battlefield 1. Interesting. I sometimes also have the feeling you have just not enjoyed Battlefield 1 because you have done nothing else besides of shooting a tank.
I have so many tanking hours. It's crazy.
I think 90% of the Battlefield 1 gameplay is you just sitting in a tank somewhere 200 kilometers away and shooting people.
Oh, that's unfair. I was usually on the objective. It's not my fault that the tanks and vehicles in that game were just grossly overpowered. My score per minute in the heavy tank in that game is just substantial.
I mean, I was pretty good. Like, actually, I think the most weapon I had the most kills with was the anti-tank cannon in the game. Because the moment you actually realized how to use that thing and how to shoot...
All right. Now, are you talking about the 80 gun or like the literal field cannon?
The field cannon, I mean.
Oh, yeah.
That thing was ridiculous.
Yeah, you get deadly with that thing.
Yeah, that was the only time where I could actually brag a little bit about my aim in Battlefield games, which is normally not happening. But for me, the worst Battlefield game, interestingly, Battlefield Vietnam. I know.
That's fair.
I'm naming all the old school ones.
Yeah,
but Vietnam was already a step back. They lowered the maps to 32, right? They added choppers to the game, which is ooh, wow, that's the only new vehicle you put in, but you removed all the other vehicles. I'm still, till today, will say that Battlefield Vietnam was nothing but something is happening here as a video game. It was really just a way on how to play old Vietnam songs. That was what the whole game was about, playing those old Vietnam songs.
Well, yeah, if you're not flying in the chopper, just blurring that in the background, you're not really playing the game.
Even as a Jeep or something, it was you couldn't even play this game nowadays anymore or stream it because it would just get DMCA'd your ass off. It's but yeah, Vietnam felt like the first step back. It really felt like a reskin.
It was very forced.
Yeah. It was basically EA realizing that Battlefield could be the next big IP for them. And they want to have a Battlefield every year in a different timeline. This is why we got 1942, Vietnam, then Battlefield 2, which was modern time, and then the future Battlefield. And
Oh,
they were just jumping
and
through the times.
yeah, we get 1943 as well on the Xbox.
Oh, I totally forgot that. Yeah.
They were all over the place. I forgot about that too.
Man, there was...
Oh, and then they had 2142 in between. Oh my God. They were really all over the place. I never thought about that. The timeline of things that they did were all over the map. Wow.
They certainly did their thing. Yeah. Yeah. It really became, for a short amount of time, it basically became Call of Duty. They tried so hard. Oh, speaking of Call of Duty, we have totally forgotten to talk about Battlefield 1 and their esports ambitions.
Oh God, yeah.
What was it, 3 versus 3 maps or something like that? Or 5 versus 5?
Man, I don't even remember. Yeah, they ended up making it. It took them like a year in development. It's so bizarre. And then they didn't give us private servers for a long time too, so we couldn't do it on our own. Because I actually played in that kind of, I wouldn't call it professional esports, but I played against other teams on the team. In 3 and 4, we just used private servers and we all set up our own stuff. And there's certain lists of weapons and stuff you're not supposed to use, whatever. So it was working. I mean, it wasn't huge compared to like Call of Duty, but it's not really a game built for that. It's so difficult. So it's bizarre that they were trying to push that so hard on Battlefield 1. And just it did not pan out whatsoever. They were going to try the same thing with 5, but same situation.
And then 5, there was the Battle Royale.
Oh, yeah. That's a different situation. I thought, because that was also Criterion, right? I think. Because that was also, who did the 2 random games? I think the Play for Free and Heroes was Easy Studios, right?
I don't know anymore.
I'm pretty sure. And then they had Visceral do Hardline, which I think might have been their last game that they developed.
It was the end of Visceral.
Which is kind of funny.
Which is kind of sad.
Correct. But I enjoyed the Battle Royale.
As last thing, do we want to talk about Hardline here, even though we are both acknowledging that Hardline doesn't exist?
We could. It's such a bizarre title.
It's... Hardline... I think Hardline, when the first beta or alpha was happening, people were like, this is not Battlefield. What the hell is this? Right?
Yeah.
And then they were like, yeah, we are pushing it back by 9 months to make it like a real Battlefield game. And then the game came back and it was like, wait, you did something to the game?
Correct. Same.
What? What?
For as good as the marketing was in Battlefield 1, Hardline was horrible because honestly, they could have just stripped the Battlefield title straight out of it, called it Hardline, and marketed it as a new solo game, and it would have been great. But for some reason, they shoehorned Battlefield in there, and they really marketed it right into the Battlefield community, even though it felt nothing like a Battlefield game. So it was a very bizarre game where it was good, but it didn't feel at all like the series that it was based in.
We have seen this in the past with actually some other games, not just Battlefield, but games in general, where they thought it would be a good idea to just take that name, which has like a lot of drawing power, and then slap it on there, and then it's like, what? But it totally doesn't play like any of the other games of that series. Why did you do that?
It's crazy. It makes no sense. It'd be like taking Command and Conquer and making a mobile game. It just doesn't work. No one would ever do that.
Shut up. Shut up. You know exactly what you just said. I mean, they didn't even have to do like the mobile game for Command and Conquer. Like just Command and Conquer Tiberian Dawn, not Dawn. What was it? Tiberian, the last Tiberian game. No, there was a Tiberian game where they removed completely base building. Twilight, I think. Tiberium Twilight was it. They completely removed the base building, and they were like, "This is what Command & Conquer players want." Huh? What? What have you smoked?
Correct. I don't see how developers why they're getting the idea that that's a good idea.
I don't
It's
think
bizarre.
it's the developers. I think this is literally EA doing some
Yeah, that's true.
marketing surveys and asking what people right now play, what's the new hot shit on the market, and then they're just trying to develop a game around that. Like that's the
That
only
logic, that
explanation.
makes sense.
It's like, yeah, Hardline. I have not played the release version of Hardline. I have to admit, I didn't want to pump money into it. I heard that
And
actually,
again,
yeah.
that was another game I have a ton of hours in, but I don't like it.
Did you play the single player campaign?
Yeah, and that was a different story entirely. So man, we could talk about single player for Battlefield series in a whole different segment, but the Hardline
It will be.
story was good. It was catchy.
I heard it was pretty
Um,
good. Yeah.
it might be tied for second, my favorite for single player or single player storylines. There we go. Through the Battlefield series, it's pretty good.
All right. Yeah, if not,
There's actual character development.
what?
I know, right? It's crazy. That actually is a thing in a story.
It's and then they moved on to this weird thing of having like, what was it? Multiple like different single player components, like in Battlefield
Yeah, I think
1
it's
and
called
Battlefield
War
5.
Stories. I
Yeah,
think,
the
and in
war
Battlefield
stories.
1, I think it worked pretty well. Battlefield 5 kind of fell flat. It was some of them were cool, some of them were not so cool.
Yeah. It's like,
It's a good idea, but as with everything in Battlefield 5, it's a game surrounded by good ideas and horrible execution.
here's the thing. Like, I really have to ask this. Do you need a single player campaign in Battlefield?
Historically, no. The exception for that entirely is the Bad Company series, but my biggest thing about that now is I think they would probably murder it. So, um, if it's any other Battlefield, I really couldn't care less if there was a single player. If it's Bad Company, I want there to be one, but I will immediately be prepared for myself to be hurt by it because I'm unsure if they could match the sort of magic that was the single player of Bad Company 1 and 2.
Yeah. I mean, it was the first games who had single player, right? Like, they didn't do a single player
Real
before.
single player. Yeah, unless you want to count,
Not the bot games.
yeah, shooting bots in the face.
No, no.
So yeah, those had the real first two stories, and then it dramatically changed pace from Battlefield 3.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I played the single player campaign of Battlefield 1. That was a trip. Like I think with, not 1, I mean 4. Sorry, 4.
Oh yeah,
I have the feeling with 4, they tried to go like the Call of Duty lane. Like,
yeah,
Murica.
just
Like
way over the top with everything.
a little bit like a lot of like movie war stories, something like that. Like in the movies.
Right.
And it's like, do I need that? It's like,
Correct.
again,
I think, but yeah, Battlefield 3 and 4, the stories are extremely forgettable.
I had to think for a second, like what that actually was. Like I don't even remember 3. Something with a bomb, I think, going off in, or was it in 4 where the nuke was going on in Paris or Warsaw or something? I don't,
The
dude,
funny part is I can't tell you.
I don't know.
I can't remember them. The only thing that stands out in my head is the mission where you're getting off of that carrier and launching off the carrier. But I can't even tell you
Yes,
which of the games it was
I
in. It
think it
just
was
looked good.
4. I think there was 4 with the carrier. I'm pretty sure it was
I think it
4.
was 4 because they introduced the new Frostbite at that
Yeah.
point, and they were trying to show, oh, look how cool this looks. So it was all over the trailer.
If you had the right PC for it, that is.
Yeah. Hey, you could run it for 10 minutes. It looked good for 10 minutes.
That's true. That's true, yeah. Like, I think TLDR for all of this, Battlefield had a lot of good times and a lot of like bad moments. And I sometimes have the feeling that they are trying. They remind me of another developer, and that is, and you probably also would know that developer, Creative Assembly, the creators of Total War,
Oh yeah.
who have something nailed down where you were just like, you got it. That's it. That's the thing. And then they change it for the next game. And it's like, why? This worked perfectly. Like, you have so many other things you can really change in this game and make better, but you take the thing which worked like 1+. Like, why? And it's the same thing. The problem I have with DICE sometimes. It's this worked amazing. Why did you change this one in particular, but ignored all the other problematic things in your game?
Oh yeah, it's amusing. It's one of those series where you could be a fan of the franchise and hate half the franchise. It's a very
Yeah,
confusing roller coaster ride.
it's a love-hate relationship.
Oh yeah, it's the same thing with the Total War series. It's like, I hate about half those.
Yeah,
Love the other half.
it's again, it's like totally weird. Like, I hope with Battlefield, and let's talk a little bit about Battlefield 6. Not too much, but then we can wrap it up, I would say.
Oh yeah, just a tip.
Exactly. It's like, I think now is the best time for Battlefield to go really innovative a little bit, especially with the new console generation. If you get one, that is. The same goes for the PC. If you get a new GPU or a new CPU, good luck.
Yeah, the real battle royale is just getting the new pieces
The
of
new hardware.
Yeah.
But let's say you have that, and I really hope that first, please don't release that Battlefield on the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. Please
Hopefully
don't.
not.
Don't do your, like, don't do that. Don't. But I really hope they are going innovative. Like, they are trying something out. Like, we have already heard that they are trying to ramp up the player numbers to, like, what was it, 128? Like, they have already
Correct.
showed that, like, last year, where they had those massive just doing things. Like, I actually hope, like, that's cool, but we need the maps for that. We need the vehicles for that. And
It,
yeah,
the important the important bit is just the development, and and then again we get more conversation about that. It depends on how much team they're going to throw at it, but yeah, the bigger the maps, the bigger the amount of people they have, the more time you need on simply one map. And
yeah,
I don't think players are going to think, well, there's more people and bigger maps, they're going to give us less content. I don't think anyone's going to think logically like that. They're going to look at the numbers of previous battlefields, and they're going to want either the same amount of maps at launch or more, at very minimum. We're very
I mean,
unforgiving at that.
the one thing EA really has to learn a little bit is also like, and this is definitely a talk we have to have about the live service stuff, is just don't abandon the game every time, even if it runs well. Like, bad, like Battlefield 4, right? Like, that thing had still so many players even years afterwards, when Battlefield 1 was already running, where EA was on a press conference actually like crying about not monetizing Battlefield 4 anymore. And I'm like, well, now you have Battlefield 1, that is going great, so that means you will probably bank on that. No, they abandoned Battlefield 1 the moment Battlefield 5 came out. And it's like, oh god. Like,
Yeah,
why?
one was interesting because yeah, they it's kind of confusing on that front. And I think that it almost seemed like they were listening to only their core community for once, whereas we said we just wanted a new Battlefield, but commercially they had so many new players that really weren't in the Battlefield series that were still playing the hell out of Battlefield 1. So the numbers were there to support it, but I think the core community wanted a new game. It was like the one time they actually listened to us.
And the weird thing is Battlefield 1 had microtransactions. They actually put in skins and stuff. So it's like there was investment there. So we again, that is a talk we can have for the next time. But like one last thing I want to ask.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing you want to see from a Battlefield 6 game. Like what is the one core feature you want to change?
I want to change or
have like whatever you want. Like this is the one thing which is like important to you for 6. It can change, it can stay, whatever. It can be new. Like you have a wish free.
Correct. I think they need to, for better or for worse, try to nail down a good time to kill, time to death model as early as they possibly can. They've never had I don't say never. In the recent history of the games they've launched, it's always changed a good bit at launch. But it was literally a roller coaster on Battlefield 5. And that will just destroy any longevity of that game. So people will be forgiving if it adjusts and changes at launch rather dramatically, but a few weeks out, you just have to stick to a certain model and then slightly adjust it from there. So they need to really nail that down in the earliest models of the game they have.
Yeah, like just I hope they and this is not my wish. This is just something I want to throw in here. It's like I really hope they are starting alphas and betas early. And they actually really take the feedback serious.
Yeah, because you have some devs that they'll launch an alpha, but they're already on the beta, so it's like they don't care really what you think at all.
It's like, hey,
they've already moved on.
Here's our alpha. The game is coming out in 2 months.
Correct.
No.
Useless.
No, I don't think so. The one thing I would love to see from Battlefield is actually I want to have bigger maps which like you can have big maps but still like focus points. Because Battlefield has, I think they actually figured it out with 1942 right off the get-go, is you just need enough spawn points on the map, right? Like cars, flag points. Like since Battlefield, Bad Company, I think, Bad Company 2, we have those, what are they called? Transponders.
Correct, like the scouts would get the mobile spawn points.
Yeah, the satellite, whatever they are, and they have been in every Battlefield game, like even in Battlefield 1.
Yeah.
Like, I think big maps are not a problem nowadays anymore. Like, I think they can actually, like, do it, and I would love to have, like, much more vehicles on those big maps. Like, I always find that a little bit, like, I'm a foot soldier. I'm not a vehicle guy. But that also is the reason that we didn't have a lot of vehicles anymore.
Right.
Like tanks. Okay. Maybe a Jeep if we are lucky. And even that is like rare. But just like give me vehicles. Especially now when this is true, we heard that the new Battlefield game is like in the modern era. You have a few choices nowadays, I heard. Like, use that. Yeah, we are not just going into wars with tanks. Like you have a little bit more to choose from.
And that's one of the primary reasons why I love those Battlefield 4 DLC. Some of the larger ones they had huge maps with a ton of vehicles, and then it felt like there was very little dead space in the maps.
Yeah.
And Battlefield 5, their larger maps, there's a whole lot of dead space, especially if you're playing Alcedon. There's literally just like a quarter of the map is just empty swampland that you could potentially use for a flank if you want to, I guess. But other than that, nothing. And then there's like a weird limit on one, vehicle types, and two, the amount of vehicles. So half the time you're just running on foot for 500 yards to the next flag, getting shot in the head by snipers.
They had that a lot on 5. They had that a lot by Battlefield 5. Like, I think one of the problems Battlefield 5 had with that is those points of interest were far too much packed, and then in between was basically nothing. Like, it's kind of funny. I'm running some Battlefield Bad Company 2 footage in the background the whole time. And they're basically playing a map where there's a lot of like dead space in between, but it's all city. I always forget this name, what this name is of the map. But it's like they are still going on, and there are still like fights over foothills because you try to get that, or there's like a building you want to capture. Like, they're not points you can really capture, but they are still important for your team to hold. And I think a lot of the time Battlefield didn't have that. Like, you were going to the spawn points and nothing else mattered in a lot of the moments.
Yeah.
So
I'd agree on that.
I hope they're getting a bit better with that. But yeah, man. Battlefield. Still love it. Still looking forward to 6. But I would say we are wrapping it up for today. But we will be back actually next week. Might be another day though, before anybody is like hoping that we are coming back on Thursday. Wednesday? It's not even Thursday. Well, it's Thursday for me, but it's still Wednesday, so to speak. But yeah, we will be back. Next time we will be a little bit more organized with topics. Like, this was really just like, let's reminisce or snark over Battlefield. But we will become a little bit more organized. And then Battlefield 6, we are slowly but surely getting closer. I still would say we are getting a Battlefield 6 announcement anytime soon. Like, so far what I have seen, maybe by the end of the month or somewhere in mid-April. Do you still remember when they announced Battlefield 5? That was... No, which month?
Which announcement?
When they first...
Or do you remember like how long before the launch is what you're asking?
No, like when did they actually showcase Battlefield 5 for the first time?
Oh, I couldn't tell you. My memory's horrid.
I think it was also like in April or something, wasn't it? They had like a special
Oh yeah,
show
I
for
never
it.
notice patterns like that.
Yeah, so
It's usually earlier in the year.
makes sense. So
EL likes to have their holiday launches, so it usually fits in. So,
especially with COVID still going on, like a lot of developers taking as much time as possible.
which is good.
Yeah, Battlefield needs that always.
Yeah.
But yeah, we will be back next week. But before we leave, Mr. Lemons, where can we find you? Not your house, but like social media, streaming and stuff. I don't want to know where you
Please do
live.
not show up.
Yes.
Yeah, you can find me over at Twitch, twitch.tv/TastyLemonsTV, because my own dumb self has taken my own name and they refuse to give me my old account back, which is always fun. Besides
like
that,
Twitch.
that's basically it nowadays. You can find me over at Twitter as well, rambling on usually about Battlefield.
Yep. And if you're watching on YouTube, you will find the links down in the description so you can follow this charming man. He also has a dog, and that dog is actually really cool and actually also plays Battlefield much, much better than he does, but he never talks about it. So make sure to check him out.
He cheats.
He's kind of cute. Yeah, a lot of people forget that there is like a deadly dog with an AK-47 aiming at you because they just see the dog and they're like, "Ah, puppers," and then they're getting shot. That's
Honey potted by a dog.
That's for sure. But Lemons, thank you so much for being here. I really do appreciate that.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
And it was definitely fun. So we will be back next week. And for everyone watching or listening, hope I see you next week. Might be another date. But yeah, should be interesting. See you for the next episode of the SourMole, a Battlefield podcast. Thank you so much for watching.